There's only been one.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. We've been getting Avengers Doomsday teaser trailers left and right, cameo scenes from pretty much every Marvel character you've ever heard, except for Blade. There's a Blade movie that Marvel has been trying to make for the last what seems like billion years, and it seems like they have finally rolled up their sleeves, given up, and pushed him to another movie. That's right, it does seem now like the Blade movie is actually dead. Apparently Marvel thinks that making a movie about a dude killing vampires is too difficult for some reason. Even though it does suck, Marvel still has plans for Mahershala Ali's Blade inside the MCU. He is still MCU Blade. And for those of you asking, yes, they are still making that Blade video game. But if you remember, they first announced the Blade movie at Comic-Con 2019. It's been that long. It seems like it's been an eon since they announced it. Why has it been so hard for them to make that movie? Why do they keep ice skating uphill? We've got Wesley Snipes on the phone. He's got some thoughts about you trying to make a Blade movie without him, because also, while this has been going on, lately Ryan Reynolds, since he was developing and then released Deadpool and Wolverine, has been trying to get Marvel to make a Logan-style send-off movie for Wesley Snipes' version of Blade. Like, let him have another movie or put him in another movie, give him a Logan-style send-off for the character that he never got back in the day. And while I don't think that Kevin Feige is going to do that, he's not going to give Wesley Snipes his own solo Blade movie again like Blade Legacy. They are including Wesley Snipes' Blade in Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars for one last ride, just in case you were worried that they wouldn't bring Wesley Snipes back at all. Like, you're bringing everybody back, why wouldn't you bring back one of the progenitors of the MCU just in general? A lot of people credit that first X-Men movie and the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie as setting off the modern comic book films, but really it actually started with Wesley Snipes' Blade. He is the godfather of the MCU. And it looks like the main reason why Marvel totally gave up on the Blade movie is that way too much time went by and they're more excited about a Midnight Suns movie, which does sound way more fire. And that will be the first MCU Blade first big movie, not counting the Eternals cameo scene. So Mahershala Ali still supposed to be one of the leads in the Midnight Suns movie. You may have seen recently that Jordan Peele has been in talks to direct a Marvel movie. Supposedly it is this Midnight Suns film. Imagine a Jordan Peele Midnight Suns film. A team-up of supernatural characters that probably won't get a whole lot of play during Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. Everybody asking, where was Moon Knight, for example, during that whole Avengers Doomsday announcement? Well, it's possible that we actually don't see a whole lot of Moon Knight in the next two Avengers movies, because they might wind up saving the character for another supernatural-based team-up.
Hoy te toca perder.
Kevin Feige said that they were also planning different types of team-ups because there's so many big teams in the comics for all the characters that were really cool, but they didn't necessarily have room for in a lot of these traditional big Avengers crossover movies. But you probably saw recently that Marvel just completely obliterated the Blade movie from their movie release schedule. This was them finally throwing in the towel, saying they could not figure out a good enough story in the next couple of years, but they completely removed it from their schedule and then added 3 more mystery movies to 2028 after Secret Wars. So it sounds like they're just completely pivoting past the Blade movie. Like, you know what? Let's not do the Blade movie. Maybe someday in like 50 years we'll figure out the Blade movie. So RIP, pour one out for Mahershala Ali's Blade movie. They're slowly making that Deadpool and Wolverine Wesley Snipes Blade joke more and more true every day. As funny as that was, there was a Sticky Fingers version of Blade on TV, so technically there has been another Blade, but I think the idea with this Deadpool and Wolverine joke is they're pretending like that never existed, like Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds are saying, there is no Blade TV series, we don't know what you're talking about. You even might remember that the disgraced showrunner from X-Men 97, Beau DeMayo, was hired to write one of the earlier versions of the Blade movie a couple years ago. This is long before he got into trouble with Marvel and got fired from X-Men 97. He says he wrote 3 drafts and a dozen outlines in 3 months, but his favorite that he wrote was a raid-style treatment where Blade finds himself defending a rundown tenement of humans from Varney's vamp hordes until daylight. He says the entire movie takes place over a single night, and he learns from one of the tenants, Jericho Drum, also a Marvel character, that Varney's attacking them because there's a female tenant also living there who Blade kind of fancies, as he calls it, like she becomes a love interest in the movie, has been magically impregnated with Lilith by the other tenants who are secretly Darkhold cultists. More Darkhold talk, where we got into that during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness during WandaVision.
The Darkhold.
You're familiar with the Darkhold?
So he says, think of the movie as 30 Days of Night meets Rosemary's Baby. The baby is Lilith. Then he says, in the end, Blade is forced to decide what to do with her, the woman, in the baby Lilith in the final act to keep the mother of evil out of Varney's hands as the first vampire arrives to kidnap her. Drum winds up bringing out some old voodoo occult objects to help Blade, in the end, defeat the Varney character. Then he says he got fired off of the movie before he was able to work on it more. It sounds like at the end of that movie, Blade is deciding what to do with the love interest. He never names who they actually would have been, like just a generic love interest, but she's still pregnant with Lilith. It sounds like he's implying that the ending would have had him not killing the baby still in her womb. Both the mother and the baby Lilith survived to the sequel movies. Sort of like a Grogu Mandalorian situation with Blade becoming like the Mandalorian, having to deal with this kid who is technically Lilith, wondering whether or not she ever will turn evil because she is technically Lilith. It'd be kind of like the Mandalorian if he was more worried about Grogu turning to the Sith. Generally sounds like a pretty solid pitch for at least that first Blade movie, depending on where they want to take things in the future. Obviously, they're not making that movie now. They fired Bo DeMeo a long time ago, so they've moved on to like a completely separate plot for the film. There are a couple other versions of the movie that involve Blade's daughter. Kit Harington's Black Knight was supposed to return during another earlier version of the movie and hunt Dracula with him using the ebony blade in his full Black Knight armor in present day. That was basically what the whole Eternals post-credit scene was meant to set up. It was the first appearance of Mahershala Ali's Blade in the MCU, and so far, the only appearance of his Blade. Kevin Feige is a total dude for being cool with people joking on him, clowning on him, Ryan Reynolds during the Deadpool movie, for all the messes behind the scenes with Marvel trying to actually just make stuff. And a lot of you will also remember in more recent memory, they did bring back Mahershala Ali's Blade character during the Marvel Zombies series, but he was the new Fist of Khonshu. He became Khonshu's new avatar because he was a friend of Mark Spector's, and Mark Spector in this Marvel Zombies universe had already been killed, so Khonshu did his thing and he just moved down the bench and selected another avatar, and it just happened to be Blade. So he was called Blade Knight.
Is them helping? They're preventing the spread of the zombie plague to the rest of the universe.
What they were going to do when they actually made that post-credit scene, like one of their first plans, was to say that Blade had encountered the Ebony Blade earlier in his life, and part of one of the versions of the movie was going to show flashbacks to him in the 1920s and earlier, just to show the history of the Blade itself, through the history of the Black Knight family, and all of his different ancestors that wielded the blade, going back to Camelot. So there was a whole bunch of Black Knight in one of the versions of the movie, but then later versions got rid of him and just used the Ebony Blade. There was a version where Lilith was going to show up in the past. This was when the movie was going to take place in the 1920s. She was going to try and control the Ebony Blade. Then they were going to carry that forward into present day just to give you a through line of the Ebony Blade heading to their Midnight Suns movie that they had been planning for a while. Since then, the last several years, there have been countless different writers, countless different versions of the movie, and Mahershala Ali apparently just is not happy with any of those versions. So if it wasn't clear, he's actually been the real holdup here, like he's waiting for what he feels like is the perfect Oscar-worthy Blade movie. Normally, you wouldn't think it's that hard to make a movie about a dude killing vampires, but he wants like the Oscar-worthy S+ tier version that's better than the Wesley Snipes Blade movies, and that's the thing that's really hard to do, because those first two Blade movies are top tier. It is going to be really hard to do better than those first two movies. And I think that's been Marvel's other big holdup, is that they don't want to make a Blade movie that feels like it's way, way weaker than Wesley Snipes' Blade. Like, he's right there, he's sitting, waiting to do another Blade movie, and we didn't bring him back. Originally, Mahershala Ali's Blade movie was supposed to set up a Midnight Suns movie with a bunch of their supernatural characters teaming up against Lilith. And because they're fast-tracking that now, whereas they weren't before, they might actually just be pivoting to that. Like, we'll bring Blade back during that Midnight Suns movie with all the other big supernatural characters, like Moon Knight, Werewolf by Night, Ghost Rider, all the characters that you wouldn't expect to be on a traditional Avengers team, getting their own Avengers-style movie. Previously, Lilith was supposed to be the MCU villain in that movie. She was actually the first villain that the Midnight Suns faced in the comics when they teamed up too, so it makes sense that they would go to her first. They were going to introduce her to the MCU in one of the earlier versions of Mahershala Ali's Blade movie, played by Mia Goth, and she's actually still signed to play Lilith, so she still could continue to do that in Midnight Suns. You might remember that MCU Agatha Harkness actually interviewed her for another movie that she was doing, how prophetic it would be if they both come back in a Midnight Suns movie.
I was not expecting to see you here.
He figured that Marvel didn't really care about his Blade movies or bringing him back at all, which makes it sound like he had not secretly been talking to Marvel about coming back in Mahershala Ali's Blade movie, like Marvel was not even considering bringing him back in that. Ryan Reynolds calls Wesley Snipes the godfather of both the Fox Marvel universe and the MCU because in his post here he says neither one of those would exist if that first Blade movie had not blown up as big as it did in the 90s, and he is correct in that. That was the movie that made studio executives at different places feel like they could actually create a cinematic universe of movies. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below and let me know what you think about Jordan Peele doing a Midnight Suns film. That would definitely make up for them not being able to do a Blade movie. Jordan Peele Blade movie would have gone hard, but Jordan Peele Midnight Suns is even better. There's going to be a bunch of big stuff happening in the next week or so. We'll get a nice shiny HD version of the Avengers, Doomsday, Black Panther, and Fantastic Four teaser trailer. We'll probably learn a little bit more about the Super Bowl Avengers Doomsday trailer they're going to be releasing. There's supposed to be something coming out around then, and that might be what they're saving Robert Downey Jr., Dr. Doom's character for, to reveal him in a real big Super Bowl kind of trailer. We will probably hear more about the cameos and the other side characters that will pop up in the background of Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars over the next couple of years, piecemeal though, just because pretty much every character you could ever imagine is going to be in these movies in some way, in the background at least. Everybody click here for that new Avengers Doomsday Fantastic Four teaser trailer, and click here for all my other Avengers Doomsday teaser trailer videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.